So I'm Mel Bricker. I go way back in creation spirituality. I started subscribing to the Creation Spirituality magazine back in the 1970s. And like many of you, I said, yes, this is where I am. And went to hear Matthew Spock speak one time in Chicago and thought, well, this is a very nice experience. And later on went to study with him in California, stayed on as his assistant and became co-director of the Doctor of Ministry program. And then helped to establish creation spirituality communities and actually coordinated these events for several years. And now I am serving on the board for the Fox Institute for Creation Spirituality as a kind of a liaison between both boards. So that's about me. Oh, and in my free time now that I'm retired, is I like to take naps when I want to. And, pardon me? Oh, my dog, yes. Walk my dog. And John and Penny really need no introduction. They've been around for creation spirituality for a long time also. John's written several books on eldering, so you want to pick up some of his books. And Penny Andrews has been one who's kept the demon list active and the connection with creation spirituality people around the country.
My demon doctoral project which was Elder Spirit Speaks. Welcome. I want to underscore Gail's point. There. Okay.
Here comes the mic guy. Mark the mic guy.
Let me just underscore that those elder interviews are really spectacular, and they stay with you long after. And Carol Vaccarillo, Gina Rose Halpern, UCS graduate, Barbara Susan Booth. Wonderful, wonderful material, and it's such a pleasure to take that time to create them and then to savor them long after they're on record at the website. So John will be interviewing, and I get to introduce you, Howard. For more than 30 years, Howard has served as an ordained minister in the United Methodist Church. He left the denomination so he could continue to officiate same-sex ceremonial unions. Both his father and grandfather were Methodist ministers, one of whom left the church over his opposition to war, and the other got into trouble with the church over his pro-civil rights stance. Howard believes that as a minister, his mission is to bless and encourage love wherever he finds it, and to bring love where it is not. So as the interview goes, keep in mind that the second half is an opportunity to share your reflections or questions for Howard. John, thank you.
Well, Howard, it is a great, great pleasure to get to interview you. Am I too loud? I sound awfully loud to myself. It is a great pleasure to interview you. As you know, we at Creation Spirituality Interviews have had the great opportunity to interview our sages and wonderful elders in our community, and we decided that you would be a perfect fit for us. So we have decided to honor you with that. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for all you do, and we honor your work.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Now, many people here know you very well, and many, like us, may not know you well and are meeting you for the first time. So those of us who don't know you well, what is the first thing we should know about you before we get started?
First thing you should know about me before we get started. Oh, my gosh. So we haven't started yet?
No, we haven't started yet. We'll start in a minute.
I thought we were into it already.
Well, we are.
Yeah, we are, yeah. Well, first of all, the first thing you should know about me is I'm a little anxious about this since you interviewed Jeremy, and 4 months later he died. So
no guarantees.
Just a little nervous, that's all I'm saying. Well, I guess the first thing you should know is the reason for my mismatched socks. And that came at my ordination with the United Methodist Church back there in the Stone Age. And I was sitting there ready to be ordained, and there were these 7 ministers, all men, all wearing black robes, and none of them looking like they were having a good time. And I thought to myself, I'm joining the ranks to be like these guys. I don't want to grow up and be like these guys. So there was lots of kneeling and bowing and looking down and that sort of thing. And I thought, okay, what can I do to remind myself not to take myself too seriously? And I thought I could wear mismatched socks. That was my 23-year-old thought process then. And so that was part of my ordination vows. I didn't say them out loud to the presiding elders, but I did say them to God. And I said, I promise not to wear mismatched socks. That is one of the few ordination vows that I've kept, actually. But so that you should know about that about me, because I figure people who take themselves too seriously are just spending too much time on that. So I
am so impressed, and they're still mismatched.
Well, they are. Well, they're not the same socks as I wore in ordination.
Thank you very much.
I've changed them at least twice.
I appreciate that.
But the airport security people love this stuff. You go through there, it's so boring, but you take off your shoes and walk through and say, "Oh, nice socks." Those are the only people who give me credit.
I will keep that in mind. So in our interviews, we usually cover 3 areas, sort of your formative experiences, your adult life experiences in your work and in your life, and then what your acquired wisdom is at the end of life, which is not at the end of life yet. But anyway, because I know your concerns. But I want to start with the formative experiences, because he's had some amazing ones. Your father... You should read this book. This is such an interesting book. It will make you laugh. It will make you happy. It's called The Main Thing. It's all about this church. And he talks about his father, and he says that, I get the impression that his father was an outspoken and courageous and visionary kind, inspirational kind of guy, a Methodist minister and civil rights activist in Florida who at the time stood up to every racist organization around. What was he like, and what was that like for you to have him as your father?
He was my God. He was my God and guru. People ask, how'd you get your call to the ministry? I wanted to be like my dad. That was my call. I just wanted to be. I remember even as a kid, I had torn his signature off of a letter and stuck it in my book, and I would practice writing his signature. And teacher thought I was taking notes, so he or she didn't care. But practice writing. I wanted to be like Dad. Dad was an amazing man. He was advocating civil rights back in the 40s when Martin Luther King didn't have facial hair. And so he was way back then, and had a cross burned on the lawn at this church in Winter Park, Florida. And because he simply refused to serve a church that would not allow anyone to be a part of it. And not just come into the sanctuary, but to be a part of the dinners, to be a part of the whole life of the community. And so he took a lot of flack for it, a lot of flack. And I just worshiped him, worshiped the ground he walked on.
How did you all deal with that? I mean, that was pretty scary.
It was pretty scary. And then he moved to Miami, and this guy, this hotshot attorney, his name was Bill Gray, I remember. And he said, with the civil rights thing, he just total segregation. I don't know if he's white supremacist, but at one time, he said to me, Howard, I was like 15, 16, he said, Howard, your dad's going to make a Christian out of me yet. Damn it.
Wow.
And he did.
And your grandfather was a pretty amazingly stubborn and principled man, too.
Yes, indeed.
What did you learn from him? Yes.
A pacifist. And so he would not allow the American flag or any flag to be flown in his church. He said nationalism and religion are poison. So, so he never allowed the flag. Well, then World War I came along. And he wouldn't allow the flag in there, and he wouldn't say, rah, rah, U.S. So somebody painted a yellow line around the parsonage as if a coward.
Oh.
And then they finally gave him the choice to stick around and take some little dinky parish or bow out. So he bowed out and opened a bookstore in Bloomington, Indiana.
Good for him. Good for him. Wow. And your grandfather was pretty amazing as a man in terms of being a principled individual who must have taught you a lot about, and your father, a lot about what it is to be a man and what it is to be in the world.
Yeah, Granddad was a trip. He always dressed up for Halloween. I mean, he lived with us in his last years, and he said, I love to scare kids. So he would dress up for Halloween and sit on, he's already like 90 years old, and he'd sit on the porch and just like hunker down like this. And the kids would come up for candy, and he'd just glare at them, glare at them. And I don't know if he ever growled, but he had that, yeah, he was scary.
He
Yeah,
was
but
scary.
He was fun.
Wow.
He was fun.
And your mom was a musician and a pianist who stirred apparently a very deep love of music in you that helped you through your father's death and followed you all through your life.
Yeah, she did. She was an amazing woman, just a phenomenal mother, phenomenal. So this was, Dad was gone all the time, but Mom was the advocate for me taking piano lessons. And so she would sit with me sometimes while I was practicing and correct me if I'm screwing up, but sometimes she'd go off and do other stuff in the house, and I would, just to make sure she was listening, I'd goof out, I'd play a few wrong notes, just to see, or I'd leave out a measure, and I was doing Chopin or whatever, and Mom would say, play that again, and so listening the whole way. She was behind me the whole way, and just delightful. I remember I used to run up the stairs, and she used to run behind me, smacking my butt all the way. Just, yeah, that was our way we went up to bed. So, but
oh, how
lovely
fun.
lady.
How
Lovely
fun.
lady.
How fun. Well, so what were you like as a kid? I mean, you sound like a very fun-loving guy.
Well, I got in trouble a lot.
Yeah.
I did, yeah, at school. In high school, when you, your punishment, whatever you got in trouble for, was to serve on the garden club, which meant you go out and you pull weeds in the garden or in the front yard of the school. And so when all the students came out of the school, it would be humiliating because here you were pulling weeds, in the garden club. And actually, I got cheered on for it. My friends would come out and say, yeah, 4 days so far. You're doing good. So
You broke a lot of
it
records.
only encouraged me to find other ways to do that. So, yeah.
Were there any-
Well, my friend Doug Millie and I, we decided, they take these group pictures for the annual, and it's just, the thespian club or the typing club or the whatever, club meets. So Doug and I decided we would get in as many of those pictures as possible because nobody's checking it. Nobody knows if you're a member of what. So we got in 23 pictures. 23. Weren't a member of any of them, 23, before we finally got busted. But they were in the annual.
Oh, I want to see your annual. Well, any other profound formative experiences that we should ask about?
Yeah, that's about as profound and formative as I can get, I think. I don't know.
Okay.
But yeah, I enjoyed my life. I enjoyed my
Clearly.
parents were phenomenal parents. And
You really are one of these people that has a great zest for life. I can just feel it and sense it. You're also a very non-traditional minister from what I read. I mean, you're singing pop songs as prayers and bringing in poets and dancers. Eleanor Rigby as a call to confession, Burning Sage. That was all really glorious. How did you go about doing that, and what was it like?
well, I, as a musician, I never got into hymns. Hymns, they're too da 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 da. Da 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 da. Amen. Really?
Yeah.
Really? Come on. I mean, every classical musician, every musician put together better things than that, And so hymns just bored me. And so I formed a band, and I realized I was in a conservatory, a musical conservatory, when I was an early teen, and I realized when I was about 14 that girls liked boys who played rock and roll more than girls liked boys who played Chopin. And so I dropped out of the conservatory and formed a band, and we won the Battle of the Bands here and there and that sort of thing. And then all of a sudden got hired to play for the school dances. And I thought, this is sweet. So we're up there playing and seeing all these, these pretty girls out there, dancing and so forth. And of course, girls are attracted to musicians. I learned that early. And so every now and then there'd be a couple of girls just standing there looking. And I thought, what could be wrong with this, And then at the end of the evening, they gave us money. And I thought, sweet. I never got a penny from playing Chopin. But so anyway, so I had a band, and we traveled. And we started being invited because I was going through theology school. We started being invited to churches all over the place. So our first program was called not gender appropriate, but sacred music for secular man. And what we're saying is, what is sacred to people who don't go to church, who have nothing to do with religion, who don't sing hymns? And you just go down the list. There's tons of them, not just Ellen Rigby, but so many Van Morrison tunes, so many tunes of Paul Simon. I mean, they're powerful, beautiful, sacred music. And so we did concerts based on those and then wrote our own stuff too. And so from then on, I realized, there's a lot of sacred music out there that just doesn't have the word God or Jesus or Buddha or Muhammad in it, but it's sacred music for a lot of folks. So that's what we do at Jubilee every Sunday. We're going to sing. In fact, if you're here on Sunday morning,
We'll be here.
you'll be singing The Power of Love.
Okay. Do you remember the name of your rock band?
Jazz Fantasy.
Oh, Jazz Fantasy.
Jazz
okay.
Fantasy, that was it. Because I don't know how it came about, but I do know how it came about. It used to be the Howard Hanger Trio. And then there were 4 of us, then there were 5 of us, and then there were 4 of us, and then there were 2 of us. And so we thought, okay, that's just messy. So Jazz Fantasy is what we called ourselves. Yeah.
So you really were outside the box a lot in those years. Did you get much pushback from the community?
Oh yeah.
Like
we played for a lot of Methodist functions after I got ordained because they thought, well, he's a legit Methodist minister, therefore he can play and do it right. Well, we didn't get invited back to a lot of events, and I just remember, I mean, we were a bunch of hippies, and so our pants had holes in them, and one of the reviews I remember is, let's see, cool is cool, and cool is cool, and something, but holes are holes.
Well, they're cool
review.
now.
They're cool now. So
were there any surprises or really gratifying moments from this incredibly new form that you created religion into?
Oh yeah. And a lot of folks really liked it. A lot of folks. We played obviously more for the kids than we did for adults, but we played for the older folks too, and they seemed to like it as much as the kids. Those middle groups, those 30s, 40s, 50s. They're trying to hold on, I think, to what is, maybe because they have kids and they want the kids to behave.
I remember, Jubilee. You created a new organizational or religious structure.
Right.
How did that go down?
Well, my appointment, when I was, these 7 ministers were not dumb. So my appointment was to experimental ministries beyond the local church. In other words, stay out of the church. We don't want you messing around in here. But go ahead and try new things. Go ahead and try some new stuff. Yeah. And so Jubilee was one of those things we tried. And alternative worship. And it seemed to connect. It seemed to work. So it was just 2 months. The first summer, it was in 1984, 85, something like that. Just 2 months. And the next one, we went to 3 months, went to 5 months, 6 months, and then a new minister came who was not at all enamored of what was going on in the church basement. So he said, that's it. So Mother Bird gave us the boot, and thank God, because I might still be it. We wouldn't have this. So,
Penny mentioned, leaving the church structure for same-sex marriages. What was that like to have to walk away from 3 generations of Methodists people?
Well, I just could not do it. I could not look at one couple and say, sorry, but you're not worthy of God's blessing because your genitals are the same. Really?
Yeah.
That is none of my freaking business.
Yeah.
None of my freaking business. And I just couldn't do that. And so I just, I knew the bishops had sent out a letter in 1996 saying, you must not, officiate even a union blessing. I mean, marriage wasn't legal back then for LGBTQ, but you may not even officiate. And I thought, really? And I went back and forth with the bishop saying, really? You're going to limit God's blessing to people who have different genitals? That's it? That's the way you're going to be? And anyway, that's what they were. So I was always, looking over my shoulder whenever I did a wedding or a blessing. And then I did a high-profile one, and it was in the New York Times.
Oh.
And there it said very clearly, I'm all hung up here. What have I done? I'm hung up. I'm just hung up. Am I unhung
There's
now?
a song in that.
There it is. Well, my name is Hanger after all, right? So, but
New York Times.
Oh, New York Times.
Yeah.
And so it was a jubilant, and she and her partner, and it said, officiating this wedding was the Reverend Howard Hanger, a United Methodist minister.
Whoops.
I got a call the next morning, and she said, my bishop, she said, you can't do this. And I said, well, yes, I can.
Wow.
And she said, well, you can't as a Methodist. And I said, well, I guess that sets the stage. So, boom. I did wrap my credentials, though, in a thing with tape that I found that said Jesus Saves all over it. So I thought, this is, maybe she'll appreciate that. But
Wow.
I didn't hear from her.
Wow. Oh, you sent them back to her.
I sent it back to her.
Oh, my
Yes,
gosh.
I sent them
Okay,
to
I
her.
got
Here
it.
are my credentials.
And you never heard from her.
Never
Oh,
heard from
no.
her. No.
So Matthew Fox in creation spirituality has been really, really important to you. The 4 paths are on the wall. What has he meant? What did you learn? And in your book, you have this ongoing conversation with him.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I was at dinner, I don't know, in the early 80s. I live in a living cooperative.
I want to hear
Yeah,
about
there
that.
are 14 of us who live there.
Yeah.
Anyway, and so we were having dinner. We have group dinners, and this guy, his name was Jonathan Golden, he came in, and he had a copy of Original Blessing, and he slapped it down in front of me, and he said, read that. And I did. And I thought, actually, there's a smart guy who actually thinks like I do, thinks like this doofus does, And so I thought, well, this person's something to pay attention to. So anyway, I met Matthew Fox. We started working together. I started leading the music for his summer workshops. And so we got together several times during the years. And in fact, I told this earlier to this group, kind of a cool story. So Matt, that particular workshop was at San Diego State. And so I'd come in on Sunday afternoon, and I was eating something, and we had an evening session coming up. So somebody said, Matt wants to talk to you before the evening session. So I said, cool. So I went up to his room, knocked on the door, and I obviously woke him up. He was in his skivvies. And so he came to the door in his skivvies, and I, trying to be cute, I said, oh, forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. And meaning I woke him up. And he said, oh, come on in. We'll talk. Just went into priest mode like that. I said, no. I don't want to make a confession here, Matt. No. So he and I had a great time together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So I love your sense of humor. I mean, that really is one of the most sparkling parts about you. Somebody told me about the weed 'em out on Sundays cliche. Can you explain that?
Well, we used to pack them in. Our attendance has dropped down lately, but we used to pack them in. It was just like people standing all around. There'd be way more than the fire marshal would allow. But fire marshal's a Baptist, so he's don't have to worry about that. He won't show up. So, but anyway, and so we figured what we need is weed 'em out Sundays, where we just do some things that'll offend somebody, and they'll leave and then not come back, and then we have extra seats. And so, and it worked, and we had a lot of weed 'em out Sundays. Well, we did one where there's a tradition that says on the table, the Passover table for the Last Supper. Anyway, do you ever wonder about if Jesus was kind of looking over his shoulder when he got invited to the Last Supper?
It was called the Last Supper, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it was. Yeah. So anyway, there's a tradition that says there was wine, there was bread, and there was milk and honey. Milk and honey, and whatever it was that I read back there somewhere, milk and honey tastes more like breast milk than anything else, and that's why kids love to nurse, because it tastes good, tastes like a milkshake. And so my wife was pregnant, or not pregnant, but nursing at the time, and I asked her if I could taste some of her breast milk. And so she gave me some in a little cup, and sure enough, it was like milk and honey. It was really sweet. Well, so one of our communions, we celebrated with the wine and the milk and the milk and honey, and several people got the idea that was my wife's milk.
Oh, Howard, you're my hero.
Yeah, we had a lot of seats after that. We had a whole bunch of seats.
And there he goes. So, someone also told me about Foghorn Leghorn.
Oh, Foghorn Leghorn. Yeah, he's my guru. He's one of my gurus. Anyway, Foghorn Leghorn is one of the wisest cartoon characters I think around, because his message, his mantra is, pay attention, son. son, I say, pay attention. How? I say, how are you going to learn anything if you don't pay attention? And so that has been one of my mantras as well. And Foghorn Leghorn, always as a kid, just regaled me with laughter, but because he's such a blowhard, such full of himself. But pay attention, which I think that behooves all of us. Pay attention. Otherwise, we're going to miss out on this thing.
Yeah. Well, getting back to serious things for a moment, you started a girls' school. Tell us about that. That is amazing.
I have 2 daughters, and I wanted a single-gender school. We traveled with my band. We ended up traveling to schools all over the country, from kindergarten through college. And then we also got a gig with the U.S. State Department, traveling overseas. And we did this for 12 years, 26 different countries, just hopping all over the place. And the good thing about it is that the budget for our trips came out of the military budget.
Oh, that must have felt
We were
great.
making music on the military. So every tour we took about $50,000 to $100,000 out of the military budget. And I went, yes. Of course, that's just like a little drop in the bucket, but nonetheless, it felt very good. But at any rate, so I saw so many schools across the country, and the schools that worked the best, at least from middle school on, were single-gender schools. They just worked the best. And so I wanted a single-gender school for my daughters. There wasn't one. So I thought, well, you've started a living cooperative. You started a music business. You started a band. You started a church. Why not start a school? So I did. And hardest thing I ever did. Oh, my God. But,
Why?
Well, everybody's looking over your shoulder.
Oh, okay.
Everybody.
Yeah,
the
they
city's
worry. What are
looking
you
over
up
your shoulder.
to?
The state's looking over your shoulder. The feds are looking over your shoulder. The parents are looking over your shoulder. Everybody's looking over your shoulder. And but we did. We got it going. It's thriving. It's a middle school for girls, grades 6, 7, and 8. Class size is 12. Their graduation's coming up in 2 weeks, and I'll be playing for it. I always play, and I think to myself, what wonderful girls. So,
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's lovely.
Yeah, but I started a school, and it's there is a kind of a funny story about the school. Tell me if I'm going on too long.
No,
Just cut me off.
I'm having so much fun. You tell us when we're done.
Well, this woman, she wanted, actually, they own, that French restaurant down in Lexington. Can't think of it right now. Anyway, they wanted their daughter to go to the school. This was early on in the years of school. I had only 20 or 30 students. So they wanted her daughter to go to school. And her husband refused. He was French. And he said, no, she cannot go to that school. And so she said, he wouldn't say why. And I said, well, you want me to talk to him? And I said, sure. So he came over and I said, so, Michelle, why don't you want your daughter to go to the school? He said, well, Howard, the thought of a middle-aged man starting a girls' school is disturbing. And I said, Michelle, I have 2 daughters. And he said, oh, you do? Oh, no problem. She can go to the school. And that's how it happened.
That's marvelous.
But it was because of my daughters.
Yeah. So what are your passions these days? I mean, you've started so many things. What's cooking in you right now?
I got a lot of ideas. Got a lot of.
Any you can share?
Well, I kind of keep them. Sort of like when you're pregnant, you know, you don't want to admit it for the first trimester.
Right,
you know, so I don't know if you've ever been pregnant.
I can see it.
Yeah, you can see, right? You see the bump?
Yeah, I see the bump. It's the Howard bump.
Rats. Well, I did throw up this morning. Does that count? No. No. Where are we?
Well,
Pregnancy. I don't
do
know.
you have any new
am I
works
pregnant
in
with anything? Yeah, right.
Are you pregnant with celestial fire or what?
Yeah, I do have a lot of ideas. One of my dreams, one of my bucket lists, I did this year. I met Bette Midler, and that's been always one of my. She's been one of my idols. I've always figured that Bette was in love with me.
Well, of course.
She just didn't know it yet, you know. She just didn't, you know. So I determined to meet Bette Midler, and she was on Broadway in Hello, Dolly. And so I thought, all right, I'm going to, by God, get backstage and meet her. So I wrote her a letter, then I wrote her another letter. Didn't hear back. I wrote to some foundation that she's the head of. Never heard back. I thought, well, rats. So we went to the theater a couple days ahead, picked up our tickets. And I said, so how do you meet Bette Midler? And they said, you won't. Nobody meets Bette Midler. She said, like this one girl, she said, we've been working here 6 months at the theater, and we've never met her. And she won't invite anyone backstage. No one. She's totally private. Whenever she has any kind of rehearsals, everyone has to leave the theater. No one is to be. Anyway, I thought, well, pooh. Well, that's a bunch of hooey. And so, but I told her we're going to be sitting on the front row center. I'll be bald, and I'll have a pretty lady next to me. And just letting you know, I'm going to be there. So Bet came out to do her final bows, and she was glad-handing. Everybody was standing up cheering. She was glad-handing all along. She saw me, and she squatted down and reached out her arms and hugged me. She hugged my sweet ass. Oh, woo, yeah.
Your life is complete.
There it is, bucket list, checked off right there. So, at any rate, so I've got other things on my bucket list that I want to follow up on.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, you're not going to share them yet.
No,
Okay,
no,
keep them
no,
to yourself.
no.
Okay.
It's going to be fun, though.
I'm sure it will be. I have no doubts about that. And so the commune that you started, or the living thing,
Yep,
that's another
yep.
interesting story.
Well, I started that. My band, I moved down from Detroit with my band in 1973. Wanted a big house to live in so we could practice there, you know, smoke dope there, go out on the road there, wash our underwear, that sort of thing. And so got down here and found this wonderful old Victorian mansion, 1890 mansion, that was just falling apart. But it was beautiful, just beautiful. I just fell in love with it. And a sweet story, a follow-up on that. But so we moved in, and then girlfriends moved in, and boyfriends moved in, and other friends moved in. And all of a sudden, 10, 15 years later, I realized, dang, we've been doing this for a while. So I think we just formed a living cooperative.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what it's been. And there's 15 now who live there right now. It's 15 bedrooms, 29 rooms. It's a big
Wow,
honking
it's a
place.
mansion.
And it's just a sweetie. But this kind of a sweet story here. When I moved down from Detroit, I'd just gone through a divorce. And so I was broke and broken. Is that me? Am I doing that? I don't know who's doing that. Anyway, so I was really torn up, and I went suicidal. And I'd really determined, okay, both my parents were dead, my marriage was dead, and I was broke. I was completely broke. And so I was looking in a mirror, and I'd figured out how I was going to do it. And I was looking in the mirror, deciding what day I was going to do it. And while I was looking in the mirror, behind me in the mirror was this house. And I had saved it from the wrecking ball. It was going to be torn down. And I realized, if I die, this old girl's going to die. And I thought, I can't let her go. And so she saved my ass, and I saved her ass.
That
And so
is
I even
very
went out.
sweet.
We
That
even
is very
went
sweet.
out into the halls and did marriage vows to her. Said, to have her to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death we part. It was like, yeah, I married that old girl, and she and I are still married.
That is a lovely
Isn't that a
story.
good story?
That is
Yeah.
a great
That's
story.
true. That's true.
Well, moving on to acquired wisdom,
Oh, wow.
which I know you have depths and depths of. What would you, looking back on your life, what would you say was your life's opus? I mean, what did you come here to do, and how has it gone?
Whew.
It's a biggie.
That's a biggie. I came to celebrate this life. I really do. I think I came to celebrate this life. I came to, what is it? What's the Mary Oliver? I don't want to leave this
one
world.
wild and precious life.
One precious life,
Yeah.
exactly. And I don't want to leave having just visited. I want to be in it. I want to get dirty in it. I want to get just up to my eyeballs in this amazing life, this horror-filled life, this danger-filled life, this glorious life, this orgasmic beauty life. And I just want to celebrate it, and I want to help other people celebrate it, because I think there's a big need for that, just to help people see. I mean, good God, we'd get one shot at it, as far as we know. You know, other people would say we don't, but as far as I can tell, we just get one shot at it. So why not live it to the absolute fullest? Why get bogged down in just having to pay the bills, or just having to toe the line, or try to be morally pure, or get into it? So that's what, and I think that's what we do at Jubilee, celebrating creation, and we celebrate ourselves as part of that creation.
That's lovely. One last question, then we'll move
Oh,
it to the
my.
audience. Who or what is God to you?
Well, I was an atheist in my teen years. I did several years of atheism, and I thought I could blow my dad out of the water with that. You know, I thought, okay, I went in on a Sunday afternoon, I remember so well, and Dad was shining his shoes. Let's see if I can do this. He was shining his shoes. He had his foot up on a chair, and he was shining his shoes like this, you know. And I came in, and I said, Dad? He said, yeah. He said, I need to tell you, because you're a minister, that I'm an atheist. I don't believe in God anymore. And Dad didn't miss a trick. He just kept on shining his shoes. He said, do you believe that I love you? And I said, yes. He said, it's good enough for me.
Oh, that's beautiful. That is the answer.
That is the answer.
Yeah.
And, of course, I tucked my tail between my legs because I thought it was going to be, whoa. I kind of walked out of the room thinking, well, that wasn't a big pronouncement, was it now?
It didn't shake him up at all.
Didn't shake him up a little bit, yeah. Yeah. So that was, what was the question again?
Who or what is God to you?
I'm still an agnostic. I can't say absolutely, because who can know the mind of God? Who can know God? I mean, that's the whole point. That's the whole point of the Jewish scriptures. You're never going to see God's face, or you die, you know. And I'm already scared here a little bit interviewing with you. I might die. So, you know.
But, yeah, you're all right.
So far, so good.
Yeah, so far, so good.
Albert Einstein talked about God a lot, but did not believe in a personal God, but talked about God as a force that moves through the universe, that it's what keeps things going. It's what keeps things, and I think if that were God for me, I can go with that totally, a force. But at the same time, I can't help but think that when you open up to that force, when you just open up, for me, prayer isn't about saying what you want, saying what God needs to do. Just opening to that, just opening to that power, that mystery. You can do that lying under the stars. You can do that smelling a lily. You can do that making love. You can do that hearing music. You can do that playing music. You can do, in so many ways, just opening to that power, that beauty, that wonder, that far beyond our ability to even imagine. Something happens. And so I do pray, but I don't say, Dear God. I pray in the ways that I've just described. So the holy God, whatever you want to call it, we did one Sunday, we did a little thing of, what do you call God? And so all the different things, judge, advocate, love, justice maker, whatever. And one woman said, I call God Al. And I said, Al, why is that? She said, just makes God more approachable. I don't know. So
thank you, Al.
Yeah, thank you, Al. Thank you. Right. So I had a good friend of mine who's a former Baptist minister. He just retired from First Baptist Church, and he's a Baptist. He is a true Baptist, but he has multiple myeloma, and so we've talked about death quite a bit. And I said, what do you think about afterlife, Guy? And he says, I'm an afterlife agnostic. He said, I don't know. I know the scriptures. I know what I'm supposed to preach. But I don't know, because as far as I know, no one has ever come back and said, yep, everything's cool. So, anyway.
Thank you so
There's the Jubilee
much.
salute.
That's
Okay.
it.
All right.
Peggy, I turn
All right,
it
thank
over
you.
to
All
you.
right. Oh, thank you. Look at that.
Yeah.
Woo. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I want to comment that Weed 'em Out Sundays links back to your garden club days, and you apparently learned something.
Well, I did learn a few things. Yes, I did. Absolutely.
Could you share? Thank you. That's wonderful.
Right.
Could you share, just so for posterity on the YouTube that will go up, your mantra and the things you shared last night?
Things I shared last night was the Jubilee mantra is, oh yeah. I think we learned that last night, right? Oh yeah? Just say it together. Oh yeah. And it comes from Louis Armstrong, one of my heroes. And
Do you have a handheld?
oh yeah. It can be said, like I say, it can be said for amen, which we do on Sundays. It can be said for hallelujah, which we do on Sundays. And it can be said for oh shit, which sometimes people say on Sundays when we come up with something like weed 'em out kind of thing. But it's a beautiful thing. The second is the Jubilee salute, acknowledging the mystery of all, that we don't know. I mean, we just don't know. We don't know anything about this universe or anything else. And so our acknowledgement that we don't know. And then third was the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. Say it. The main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. And, of course, what is the main thing? We do the salute because we don't know. But we think it has something to do with celebrating creation, something to do with celebrating our lives, living lives of love, compassion, forgiveness. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Does someone have a question or comment for us to kick off your reflections on what's been said?
Howard, this is a practical question, not a spiritual one. I'm Patty
Okay.
from Potomac. How did you manage to acquire this wonderful property here in the heart of Asheville?
Yeah, you want me to tell you that story?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Asheville was a ghost town. Asheville, you could see tumbleweed blowing through the streets. I mean, nothing was going on in Asheville whatsoever. Wall Street was part dirt and gravel. There was nothing going on. And so Grove Arcade right over here, boarded up, totally boarded up. Downtown where the Haywood Park Hotel is, chicken wire over. I mean, it was a ghost town, and there was nothing going on downtown whatsoever. So this was first it was a bus garage, city bus garage. They used to park the buses right in here, park 4 buses. And there was an office up here, and the people would work on the buses. Then it was a furniture warehouse for whatever stuff. And then it was a bar, a music hall. And it was a Thomas Wolfe Music Hall. And Danny and what's her name, Reiser, ran it. Right over there was a stage where the singers usually sit. I saw Arlo Guthrie, John Prine, the Byrds, Arlo Guthrie. Anyway, whole bunch of really cool people sang right over there. Well, it got involved with drugs and whatever, and so it folded. And so this property was available for lease, the upstairs, for $2.40 a square foot for lease, which is warehouse cost. That's what you pay for a storage space, storage unit. And so we went for it because there are very few buildings this big that don't have posts. And we wanted a big open space, and this was the only one we could find that was available. And so we said, all right, we'll do it. And we came in. This used to have a drop ceiling. The ceiling was 12 feet tall, 12 feet up. Oh my God, it was a drop ceiling. I mean, it was stained. It had, and it had all been pulled down. They'd had wires in there, and the insulation was all over the place. And these windows were all busted. The place smelled like beer and urine. I mean, it was a pit. And concrete floor. There was, and so we came in to bless it on that afternoon in whatever it was, August or something. It was hot as hell in here, steamy, flies buzzing around, smelled like an Exxon bath station. And it was just, and so we sat on butcher paper because nobody wanted to put their tuish on that dirty floor. So we sat on butcher paper, lit a candle in the middle, no electricity, of course. And David Wilcox, who's a local singer-songwriter who was part of Jubilee then, he sang a blessing for us. But I just remember looking around and thinking, holy God, what have we done? What are we doing here? This is impossible, But that's how we started. And then eventually people came in and said, we're going to sell it. Do you want to buy it? And by then, Asheville was beginning to come up. We realized whoever bought it might throw us out if we were still leasing, or they might jack the rent up so high that we couldn't afford it. So we bought it. Yeah.
What year?
2003, I think it was. I think that's right. Is that right? You guys got some jubilants here. Yeah.
What, was it creation spirituality then, or was it?
Yeah. We were celebrating creation all along. I mean, my connection with Matthew Fox just rubbed off, and so it was inevitable. So we were doing the creation spirituality thing, but we combine it. We read from Hebrew scriptures and the Gospels every week. So we combine it. We merge those two, and we don't find any conflict. In fact, this Sunday we're going to read, if you're there, we're going to read together a couple of lines from the Song of Solomon, Song of Songs, Canticles, whatever you want to call it. But eat, friends, drink, and be drunk with love. Isn't that beautiful? Yeah, say it.
Yeah.
Eat, friends, drink, and be drunk with love. That's in the book. That's in the book. And it's called wisdom literature. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Comment over here?
Question. So have the stories of Jesus continued to be significantly relevant to you? And if so, how do you, in a local ministry, in a Christian context where so much of Christianity is exclusive, how do you hold to the truth and the meaning of the Jesus stories in a context that celebrates diversity of ways of experiencing God?
Excellent question. Excellent. I don't call myself a Christian. I call myself a follower of Jesus. Christian usually implies come to Jesus or go to hell, and I can't go there. So I call myself a follower of Jesus. And we look at Scripture as metaphor. I mean, there's really no surety that Moses ever existed or that the Exodus ever happened. There's no archaeological evidence whatsoever. You know, people who say Jesus is a myth. Frankly, I don't care. The stories are phenomenal. The stories are great. You care if those, I mean, when you're reading Three Bears to your kid, the kid says, is that true? Well, you say, well, no, but it's a good story, isn't it? Yeah. And it's fun to read, right? Yeah. That's the way I lead in discussions of the Bible. It's not a fact book. It's not a history book. It's not a science book. It's not. It's more than that. Was it Albert Camus? Fiction is a lie through which we meet deeper truths. And I love that. Fiction is a lie through which we meet deeper truths. So I try to stick to the stories of Jesus as clearly as possible. I like to see them as art. You know, you don't say what this piece of art means. This is what that means and nothing else. I think the artist would be offended. And so it's, you don't say what Beethoven's Fifth means. No. It speaks in so many ways to so many people. So that's how I do it anyway.
Hi, Howard.
Hi.
You explained your theology very articulately now. But I'm curious, when you were in your 20s and entering, the ministry, were you an agnostic then? Did you have this theory of your theology that well developed then, or did that develop?
I was more of a stodgy, kind of corn up the butt kind of deal. I was a pretty stodgy seminary goer, and I tried to toe the line, and I was into the whole thing. I had a morning ritual that was like, I would go out, and there had a little woods next to my apartment, and I would go out in the woods, and I would meditate. I would do a quiet meditation, and I would read some sort of prayer from somewhere. And it was very proper, very, that sort of thing. And then I began to see that my stodginess, and I was stodgy, was keeping me from opening, now as I now call it, opening to the holy, opening to that which I cannot understand, cannot fathom. Because my stodginess had a kind of a surety about it. This is what you do. You meditate like this, and then you read a prayer like this, and this is the way you approach the divine. And it turned me off. I turned me off. And so that's when I began to open up, and this is when the sacred music for secular man business started happening. So, I'm different than I was then. Oh, yes, I am. Yeah.
We have time for 2 more questions or comments.
You all are being very kind, by the way. Thank you. I appreciate that.
I just curious to know who some of your heroes are and why.
Oh, I can name those. Margaret Mead. Definitely Margaret Mead. I studied under Margaret Mead. She blew me away. First day in class. She was Margaret Mead, for God's sake, you know, back then in the 60s. So she passed out 3x5 cards. She said, put your name, your student number, and the grade you want for the course. So I did, you know. So she stacked them up, put them on the desk up there, and she said, that's what I'm turning in. Your grade is set now. Those who want to learn something, stick around. Those who only want a grade, get out of here. She pissed off the administration so bad because everybody in the class, all 300, got A's. And I love Margaret Mead. Margaret Mead is one of my heroes. Bob Marley is one of my heroes. Louis Armstrong, obviously one of my heroes. Jimmy Buffett, one of my heroes. Mary Oliver, one of my heroes. My dad, one of my heroes. My mom, one of my heroes. Those are some of my heroes. And they have taught me, everything I know. So.
Can I just tag on that? Who is a contemporary hero?
Well, Mary Oliver's still around, and she's still around. Annie Dillard's still around. I didn't mention her, but she's one of my top guns. Jimmy Buffett, for sure, he's still around. Yeah.
And he's starting nursing homes.
Yes, he is a businessman. Whoa. Yes, indeed. Woo. Yeah, wise man. What's that? Yeah, he's an idol. Yeah.
I'm Larry from Portsmouth, Virginia. I've met many people in recent years who people call atheists. They just don't believe in our God. They do believe in their higher power. People don't understand that. I just want to make that comment.
Good comment. Thank you. And atheists, as was mentioned earlier, atheists can be as dogmatic as any religious person, and that's a turnoff for me. So, how are we doing?
We're doing great. There's time for one more pressing question.
Pressing question. You got to press. Oh, this guy.
It's not a question, it's a comment, and I don't need the mic. I've been attending Jubilee every Sunday that I'm in town, which is most of the time. Have participated in many different events, the board, and every word that comes out of his mouth is exactly who he is. There's not a false statement, there's nothing. This is exactly our man.
You're mighty sweet, man.
No, you are.
Oh, listen to it.
This is who he is.
Listen to it.
What a great,
well, thank you.
great end.
Thank you. All right.
No to end on.
I got a flash for you. I got a flash. Yeah.
Thank you all so much for coming and being part of this, and know that you can refer to your friends to